and tuning in today. As a reminder for all of you who are brokers, the reminder to renew your license by May 31st of the year. With the state opening up, I want to remind everyone that while the CDC is tomorrow's relaxing the mask guidance for vaccinated persons and the state's opening up more businesses, CTR recognizes that extensive parts of the population are not yet vaccinated, including a lot of children and those with medical conditions that don't allow for vaccination. With this guidance, it's only voluntary. CTR continues to advise the best practices as one, to avoid hosting broker and public open houses and due to the volume of strangers, and then also to limit the number of who enters the home at the same time for your
Now,
client.
Bonnie, we are fortunate to have Carol with us today. She's our CTR president, as we all know, and Cindy Butts may be dropping in after 12:30. So we will revisit anything CTR related at that time.
Yeah, they give us any updates.
Hey, Carol.
We will be opening up our own ECAR meetings in person with a hybrid approach. For those who want to attend, we will be asking you to wear a mask unless you've been vaccinated. And we're going to have hopefully a camera set up so everyone can see and be seen. We have a couple of events coming up. Tomorrow's the Rhode Island, Connecticut Cross Borders virtual training event, and there's over 200 people registered. So that's going to be very, very informative. Monday, May 24th, there's 2 CE classes, Understanding Racial Bias in the morning, which is mandatory this year. If you haven't had it, you need to have it. And Code of Ethics, which is also mandatory, and that's in the afternoon. Please encourage your agents to register and take these. It's not available anywhere but through the association. And through the states that has classes too. But Code of Ethics is coming due December 31st. If anyone who has not taken it within the last 3 years. Wednesday, the 26th, in the morning, 9 to 10:15, there's an economic forum with Mayor Pete Nystrom and Angela Adams from the Norwich Chamber. They're going to be discussing business, the state hospital update, and what Norwich is doing to stop Asian hate. It's open and it's free to everyone. June 5th, we're doing a Shred It event and food drive up at the board office, 10 to 1. Bring your files, get rid of them, and bring a can of food. No need to register, just tell your agents and come and get your stuff shredded. June 9th, an outdoor awards banquet will be held at Great Neck Country Club with dinner. It will be our first live event for the year and looking forward to seeing all of you there. Please encourage your office to attend in support of this year's award candidates. Our agenda today is a brief summary of the changes to the new London County closing customs. There was a great video they've done already. And by the way, for our Windham County members, there aren't any changes to report, or we would have had an update on that as well. If there are in the future, we will host that as well. And we are having a farmland open space class and happy hour at Grill 37 on July 14th. And Heather Gagnon is here today to present the main differences between the CTR and the ECAR purchase and sales agreement. And we will discuss the remedy for unsatisfactory inspections and open the forum for questions. I know professionalism is being tested these days with the competitive market. So if you have anything to add, we will hold it open for you to discuss. So please, let's get started with the attorneys.
Well, I drew the short straw today. John carried the load the last time when we met. We had a Zoom last week to discuss the changes to the closing customs. And really briefly, for those who aren't aware, we do, and I was surprised to hear this at the membership meeting we had last week. People didn't realize there were such a things as a closing customs. About a 25-page document. The Bank Bar Committee is a subcommittee of the London County Bar Association. It's about 50 or so attorneys we meet on a regular basis to discuss the customs that we have adopted starting back in 2000 and how it relates to closings. And it incorporates a lot of different things, a lot of the things that you see happen at closings. They're available on the ECAR website if you're really interested in what they say. But the one thing we did change last month was dealing with occupancy and funding. And the new requirement is that the buyer is not allowed access to the premises until the seller's attorney receives a wire funds or has a check in a form that is as good funds and readily available to be cashed. This is something we had been discussing for a long time about making this change. It puts us in concert with the rest of the state of Connecticut and, quite frankly, with the rest of the country as far as funding transactions and when occupancy is delivered. But the changes that our industry went through as a result of COVID kind of put a brighter spotlight on this issue, and I think got the topic to be discussed again. It was brought to the attention of the Bank Bar Committee meeting. John is the chair of that committee, but it was neither he or I were the one that brought this issue forward. But as we discussed it over several events, several meetings, it was an overwhelming consensus, nearly a majority. I think one, maybe two attorneys on the committee out of 30 some odd votes voted against it. Decided to make the change that delivery of possession will not be given until the transaction is funded. And what's happening today with the split closings is, sellers are pre-signing, overnighting docs, and buyers' attorneys are meeting with their clients and wiring funds to the seller's attorney. And until those funds are received, possession cannot be delivered. Now, that's the default provision. That doesn't mean the parties, for a multitude of reasons, can't agree otherwise, if that's what the parties desire to do. And really what it means for agents and brokers is we have to be mindful of stacking all your closings on the Friday at the end of the month. Each attorney is a little bit different about how quickly they can get money out. As John said last time we spoke, his bank will allow him to send a wire up till 6:30 p.m. But that doesn't mean it'll hit the recipient's bank that same day. More likely than not, it won't. It won't hit till the following day. So for agents and brokers, it's just making sure that you now, not only are you telling your clients that the closing day is a target. When you sign that contract, that doesn't mean it's going to happen on that day. There's a lot of moving parts. And then on top of that, just because we close on a particular day doesn't mean you're going to gain occupancy on that day. Now, if that presents an issue, then we need to discuss it ahead of time, and maybe the parties can agree otherwise. But what's been happening, what we've seen recently, is the buyers are moving in, and me on the seller side, I'm calling the buyer's attorney, where's my money? Where's my money? 2, 3, 4 days later, I have not received the wire from the other side. Much like any other product that you buy, you don't get it till you pay for it. You don't go buy a car and say, all right, I'll pay you on Monday, thanks. And a lot of the discussion when we first started talking about this focused on the downsides to the buyer by making this change. But we represent sellers too. And there's a lot of steps that we have to go through as closing attorneys to get the ability to release funds. And oftentimes, it's happened to me a couple of times in the last few months, where I don't have money and my seller's calling me saying, where's my money? And why are they living in this house that I don't have money? John had an issue years ago where they closed late on a Friday, and the buyer, he came into the office with a message telling him not to record because they didn't want to buy the house anymore. So they were already in there and changed their mind. So there's like a lot of different ways this can go sideways. And it's really just putting us in line with the rest of the state. We've gotten a lot of questions. Well, what do I do with the keys? What do I do about walkthroughs? You hold the keys until there's funding authorization. That's it. Until there's funding authorization, you hold the keys. So you still do your walkthroughs in the ordinary course. You still do everything else the same way. It's just changing the time of when we give delivery of possession. John, I don't know if there's much more to add than that. Last time we kind of went into more historic discussions about the customs and how we got to where we are. But I think at this point, It's just making sure everyone's aware that possession will not be delivered until the wire is received, or the parties can work out a different agreement.
John, I think you,
John.
John and Andrew, you guys have made it really clear, and I don't think we need to go too deep. We've already had 2 forums. If anyone has any other pressing questions, John Vincent, you just
I
got
do.
yours answered about what to
No,
do with the
I'm
keys.
not answered yet. I'm not totally answered.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, we want to totally answer you, John.
I am in possession of the keys and in possession of the house.
Who are you? Are you the
Seller-
listing agent or are
I
you
am
the
the
buyer's
listing-
agent?
I am the listing agent.
Okay.
Am I waiting for the attorney, the seller's attorney, to contact me to tell me that you got paid before I can give these keys away? How do I
You're
know?
waiting. Yes.
How do I know?
Yes. You're coordinating it with your client's attorney. Yes.
Okay, I
And
just,
they should be communicating with you. They have to communicate the fact that they've received funding. Either that or they've made arrangements with you and your client to allow occupancy prior to receipt of funds.
now I got the second part. Okay, the first part is just making sure that the paralegal or the attorney contacts the listing agent and said you're clear to go. That's all.
The attorney representing the seller
Yes,
should contact their agent to tell them that they received funding.
yes.
Okay. I said this, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I've gotten lots of calls from people asking similar questions, and I'm not a realtor and I'm not a marketing guru, but if you watch all those shows on television, where and most of those states are title company states, where the title company is handling both the buy and the sell side. The agent representing the buyer is meeting the buyer at the house and handing them the keys. It's the perfect bookend to the transaction, right? Here you go. Congratulations. I'm so glad that I'm able to give you the keys, and everything's all taken care of. I mean, I realize it means that you got to go to the house again, but it's a perfect bookend to the entire transaction if you want to take advantage of that.
You got my answer. Thank you.
John, to John's point, the thing is that we do not hear typically as listing agents that the closing has actually happened or that funding has happened. So if the attorneys with this change can go and add one more task to their list of things that they have to do, that would be super helpful. And we're all in this together. So if we can just get that notification as John requested, it would be super helpful.
Yeah, I don't know how else an attorney would expect that occupancy would be delivered, other than having the seller's attorney communicate the fact that they are in possession of funds.
And expand that idea to being both sides, because when it gets to be late in the day, some people, they check out at 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And if we could just be notified as agents so that we can then inform our principals, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Well, let me just say this, I think that what Andrew said earlier in his talk is that, avoiding Fridays, especially at the end of the month, is something that would be helpful. The fact of the matter is that every office in the world, other than, maybe you guys, have business hours. And Andrew handles all of his own stuff. I see all the emails that come in. I work ridiculous hours, but I will tell you that there are plenty of law offices that at 5 o'clock shut their doors, don't have emails forwarded or voicemail forwarded to email. And you're just going to have to make sure that the attorneys that you're working with understand your expectations, right? I mean, we've had discussions about this in the bank bar meeting. We're going to have another bank bar meeting in a couple of months, and we'll talk about it again. But I think it's important that you guys communicate your expectations with your professionals. They should know what you expect from them. If they don't get it, then maybe it's time to go to Andrew.
Jan, if I could jump into Jan, you're from Windham County and John and Andrew, I understand that all the other counties in Connecticut already are doing this. Jan, do you want to speak a little bit to what problems or if there are any, or, I mean, are there any issues with this new way of doing this?
You know, I think Windham is a little different. I think Windham is closer to what we do on a practical basis. I think that you really need to talk to somebody in Hartford, Fairfield, New Haven counties, because that's where we see a significant difference in custom. So I don't know that Windham is going to be the best alternative. I think they just do things the way we've done things in the past.
Yeah. Jan, you're on the call, so go ahead if you want to add to that at all.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Actually, I haven't personally run into that problem. It's just usually very casual here that they get the keys. And I've heard about sellers being irritated and not getting their funds until later, but I hadn't run into this actual issue. So this is very helpful to hear your explanation, and thanks for recognizing Windham County.
Of course.
And again, Susie, this doesn't mean that the parties can't agree otherwise. I just want to keep saying that. We as the attorneys have to take the most conservative stance that we can to protect our clients. But if there's a unique situation and the parties all discuss and agree that, you know what, we're given the particulars of this case, of this transaction, for example, it's a late afternoon closing that I have. It's a local lender. I call John and say the money's in my account. These people are pregnant. There's ways that we can definitely work around if we have to, but this is just the default provision to make things go the way they should go to be safest and put us in compliance with the rest of the state.
There's one thing I'll toss out, Andrew, in that, this is the third time that we've discussed this. And in this setting, I think it's important to point out that it's not always the attorneys that are the issue. We spoke about when Jonathan was presenting that there are certain lenders that have a back-end process and a back-end checklist that's got to be run through. And those particular lenders, and I had asked, and John kind of laughed when I asked, if we could identify who those problem lenders are, but no, we can't.
But Greg, it's not always a problem of the lender. It's just the process itself leads itself to inherent delays. And given the volume at the end of the month on a Friday, for the time for me to get docs, get them signed, get them back, someone to review them, someone to give funding authorization, someone to send wire, clear the Fed, get to my account. There's a lot more to it than me saying, here's the wire.
That's the key.
And that's what you're getting at.
That was the key point, though. The funding authorization where you're handcuffed. You guys can't do anything until you get that lender authorization. So I'm not going to say it's a friction point. Let's just all agree on that. And then the other point that we had talked about, Susie, was it last week? We had the members forum and we discussed this, and it was there are 3 lockbox access visits. We've got the pre-repair, and this is going back years. John, I think 5 years ago, said, we as agents, we as buyer's agents and listing agents should be going into the houses to inspect repairs ASAP, weeks before closing. All right. And the repairs should not be looked at hours before closing. The second component to the lockbox and the access and the pre-inspection of buyers was the pre-closing inspection to make sure the copper pipe's still in the house. Okay. And then we then have the post-closing pickup. And the new thing that my takeaway as a broker and a listing agent, I'm counting on being able to have to go back to go and give lockbox access, pick up my lockbox after I provided lockbox access, after the closing attorneys have provided me with confirmation that funding has been transferred. So, that pickup of the lockbox days before, no, it's not happening. The giving of the keys, it's not happening unless, as Andrew has said, there's an alternate agreement by the parties. So there's 2 points that I wanted to make there with lockbox access, inspections being confirmed, repairs being confirmed, and then the lenders. It's not the attorneys sometimes that are
Hey,
slowing
Greg.
things down.
So I think you made your point. That's good.
Thank you.
I think we, unless anybody has other questions for Andrew and John at this point, okay, Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you. So in looking at the contract, which is a real good, concrete, communicative between the parties, on 16, it talks about occupancy.
Lisa, this same question's been asked a bunch.
Oh, okay, so I
and
wasn't.
I don't
present
mean to,
for
jump.
that.
Yeah, I don't mean to.
Are we going
step
to
on
edit that is the question?
No, because you got to read the contract as a whole, and you got to read paragraph 1E. It's a simultaneous
Mhm.
event where funds are delivered at closing, occupancy is given at
Okay.
closing. So it's a
Okay.
precondition. One is a precondition of the other.
Exactly. So I guess my thought is now that everyone else is doing it and we're just catching up, it sounds like, do we have a couple of suggestions from the country, from other counties that have been doing this? What are their A, Bs, and Cs? Do we have anything on that?
You have to talk to other professionals.
Yeah, you'd have to talk to
other
them
of your
because
professionals.
from John and I's perspective, not much is really changing. It's just when we're telling the other side, you can do what you have to do. As far as the practical reality that you guys have to confront on how you prepare and deal with the occupancy. I think you'd have to talk to brokers down in Middlesex County that deal with this. I got to run. I got some people coming in here, but
Yeah,
when I deal with out of county attorneys, they're shocked that we don't already do it this way. They just can't even believe that this is the way we do it. So I think it's just the change itself that's giving people a little bit of angst. But once we get used to this new way of doing it, I don't really think that it'll present much of an issue. So I'll leave you in the capable hands of Attorney Peck.
all right. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, guys.
So next, we got Heather to highlight the differences between the CTR contract and the ECAR contract. So go get them,
Okay.
Heather.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. And yeah, just to sort of piggyback that real quickly, because we sort of straddle 2 counties. Middlesex County's been doing it this way for a long time, and it's pretty seamless. It's just setting the expectation with the buyers that they don't get access until we're funded, and it's just a communication at the onset and doesn't seem to affect anybody. So I think it's just about communication. So anyway, that being said, I'm going to share my screen. Susie asked me to do a comparison contrast for you today on the similarities and the differences between the CTR contract, purchase and sale agreement, and the ECAR contract today. I'm in a position where we see both on a regular basis, and we're constantly coaching our agents to be able to identify whether they're the recipient or the one that is actually writing the contract, to understand the differences. So important to know what all of our contracts read, because there's enough of a difference in the language that if you're not familiar with timing and clauses, it could make or break your contract. So I've chosen 3 key elements of the purchase and sale agreement that I'm going to go over with you today. So I'm going to share my screen. Make sure everybody can see me here. And everybody can see me?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. All right, so the purchase and sale agreement, ECAR versus CTR comparison and contrast. So the first thing that of course is important is we want to talk about the earnest money and the similarities and differences between the 2 purchase and sale agreements. So on the ECAR purchase and sale, I wanted to highlight if and when there's a second deposit. On the ECAR purchase and sale, it's sort of an open date election. And the form of that second deposit can come in whatever form the buyer chooses, whether it's a personal check, buyer's check, certified check. And so what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've just attached to the section, right? So you would find this, I call it the money page on page 1, section B. If your buyer elected to do a second deposit, this is how it would read: by additional deposit on or before. It's pretty vague, right? You choose a date, doesn't say how that payment needs to be. You're just going to select a date. On the CTR contract, there's a lot more language that comes along with this. And so if you are an ECAR agent and you have somebody that's presenting you with a CTR purchase and sale agreement, it's very important on the receiving end that you're very clear on the language so that you understand what it is you're supposed to be receiving. So on the CTR contract, purchase and sale, that second deposit must be in the form of either a cashier's or certified check. And then the language goes on to state that it has to be payable within a specific number of calendar days from the date of the fully executed contract. And this is that section. So it's very, very clear. So again, if you're, as an ECAR member, if somebody has presented a purchase and sale agreement to you and their buyer is saying that they will be presenting a second deposit, you need to be prepared to be accepting a cashier's or a certified check for that second deposit within X number of calendar days that they've indicated after the fully signed contract is received. The ECAR purchase and sale also states that if the deposit isn't paid, if it's not received by the seller may declare the buyer in default, and they do that by notifying the buyer by certified mail. And if after 5 days they haven't heard back from the buyer, they can declare them in default. And that language is spelled out here in section 19 of the ECAR purchase and sale agreement. So the deposit funds that are to be received have to be made at the stated time and applied, and it says it's applied towards the buyer's down payment, and it shall be made payable to the listing broker, or it could be made payable to an escrow agent. And it goes on to say that if the deposit funds are not received by the buyer, the seller may give written notice of such failure to the buyer at the address on the purchase and sale agreement, and it has to be done by certified mail. And if they have not received the check or deposit within 5 days, then they may decide to hold the buyer in default. And then the contract goes on to define what default is. Now, I've made a little note here in the margins that says that this is not on the CTR contract or the CAR contract. That's because there is no sort of default definition on the CTR contract. Now, the difference is that the CTR contract actually uses time is of the essence. So that is spelled out on the CTR contract where all deposit money is referenced. So the CTR purchase and sale states that time is of the essence, and if the deposit is not received after 3 calendar days, the seller can then declare the buyer in default and terminate the contract. It's just very cut and dry. So again, if you have a contract that's been delivered to you, a purchase and sale on a CTR purchase and sale agreement, and you have not received your deposit monies, first or second, within 3 calendar days, your seller, because this contract is time is of the essence, can decide to determine that this buyer is in default. They do not have to submit a letter through certified mail. Now, if this is a second deposit, Then it goes on to further state what will happen with the first deposit. And that means that it will either be continued to be held in escrow by the escrow agent or the broker, or whatever terms follow the contract. So important to see that time is of the essence language is in there. We talked about this in our meeting today. Important to see that it says that the seller may, and so we ask the attorneys this all the time, when you see language like the seller may, if seller and buyer agree to extend something, we always say that it has to be in writing, right? Verbal agreements are never going to be satisfactory to change a date. If for some reason a deposit is going to be late, we always ask for an addendum that says this is going to be late, especially because we have a time is of the essence clause in this CTR contract. Okay, so that's where the deposit money comes in and the similarities and the differences. Now the mortgage contingency, there's some differences in this as well between the two contracts. The ECAR purchase and sale has a time to apply for mortgage. If the buyer fails to apply by the date the contract states they will be in default. The CTR purchase and sale does not have a time to apply contingency. The ECAR purchase and sale further states that if the buyer is unable to obtain mortgage commitment by the contingency date, oh my gosh, so sorry. My phone is ringing on my computer. Sorry about that, guys. Get back in there. That's what happens when you have a phone connected to your laptop. It goes on to further state that if the buyer is unable to obtain the mortgage commitment by the contingency date, then all deposits shall be returned to the buyer upon proof of inability to get mortgage commitment. And so here is the mortgage contingency language from the ECAR purchase and sale. So it says buyer agrees to apply for the mortgage within X number of calendar days. Again, that language is not in the CTR contract. So if you receive a CTR purchase and sale agreement as a selling agent, and you're asking that buyer's agent, when did your buyer apply for mortgage? They're not used to that language. So it's just understanding the customs of those contracts. That's not a date that they're used to having to disclose. It also says in here that if it is further agreed that after diligent effort, the buyer is unable to attain the mortgage commitment, then all deposits shall be returned to the buyer. That's pretty straightforward. Okay, so that is the ECAR contract. In contrast, there's a lot more language and it's a lot stricter on the CTR contract. The CTR purchase and sale requires that the buyer provide the seller with a copy of the written mortgage commitment no later than the mortgage contingency date. If there are conditions in the commitment letter that are outstanding, and I'm going to go through this with you guys, then the buyer has the right to cancel. In addition, if the seller isn't satisfied with those conditions in the commitment letter and the buyer hasn't opted to cancel on their own, after 7 days, the seller has the option to cancel the agreement and return deposit money held in escrow to the buyer. So let me show you how this works, because this always becomes like a what? The seller can cancel if they're not satisfied with the mortgage commitment. So let me show this to you. All right, so I'm going to give you guys a chance to sort of read this. First of all, no time to apply. You're basically going to put a date for mortgage commitment. The buyer has to provide the seller and broker no later than the contingency date with a copy of the written commitment for the mortgage obtained by the buyer. Now, when the buyer receives that commitment, if it contains the following conditions, which most do, I just want to reinforce that, and they have not been satisfied on or before the mortgage contingency date, the buyer has the option of terminating the contract. Okay, so those contingencies would be, or conditions would be, verification of employment, lender verification that buyer has sufficient funds to close, lender approval of buyer's creditworthiness, or if applicable, lender approval of common interest community.
Hey, Heather,
Now, hold on one second. Just give me 1 second. Now,
I just wanted you to maybe blow up the screen just a
oh,
tad.
sure. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So bear in mind, you guys, that in order to get mortgage commitment, all of these things, with the exception sometimes of the appraisal, which might be outstanding, all of these things have already been done, right? There's always going to be a second verification of employment, right? This is talking about the first verification of employment. So if your buyer receives their mortgage commitment, this is saying that if these things have not been satisfied, right? So it's kind of sort of, how can you get mortgage commitment and not have these things be satisfied? But in addition to these, there could be other conditions that have not been satisfied, right? So such conditions have not been satisfied. Any of the following conditions, then the buyer has the right to terminate. If they don't terminate, if they do not elect to terminate, the seller within 7 days can give written notice to the buyer and the broker that the seller elects to terminate. So what that means is, because the buyer is required to share their commitment letter, if there's any other outstanding conditions, maybe they have to pay off a credit card, or there's something else on that commitment letter that makes the seller or the list agent or broker uncomfortable, the seller has the option to cancel the contract and return the deposit to the buyer. That, you guys get that, okay? So you have to be really sort of clear with that if this is the type of contract that you're receiving. Okay. So then finally, moving on to inspections and remedies. Oops. So, and just to sort of point out, so this language appears to be sort of very, very friendly towards the buyer on the CTR contract. On the flip side, the inspections and remedies language on the ECAR contract has a tendency to be more friendly toward the buyer than the CTR contract in comparison. The purchase and sale agreement on the ECAR contract states that inspection and remedy clause timing begins with the receipt of the inspection reports, right? You set your date for your inspection report. Upon receipt of the reports, the buyer has 5 days. If they choose to go with A, they can supply those reports to the seller within 5 days. Upon receipt, the seller has 5 days to decide what they want to do with those reports. And then the buyer and the seller have 5 days to negotiate. So you have about 15 days of negotiation following the time of the inspection period. So if you added it all together, we could say from the time of contract and all the way through, if you used up all of that time, maybe we're talking about 21 days. And the reason I say that is because on the CTR contract, you're using one date, where you're basically saying from the date of contract, everything is going to be completed, the inspections are going to be done, and any discussion or negotiation for remedy will be resolved by a certain date. And so typically buyers agents will, right? So you're basically adding up all of that time. So let me show you that. So here it is on the ECAR contract. Buyer shall obtain written reports for such inspections on or before you choose a date. You then start your remedy. Written notice within 5 days. Itemizing any requests that the buyer may have. Seller then agrees to provide a response within 5 days. There's your 10. And then the buyer and seller need to agree or maybe cannot agree. And then within 5 days, you get a response back. So you end up with approximately 15 days if you used up all of that time to sort of negotiate all of your inspections, if you choose to go with A. On the ECAR contract, you have B, 14B, which states that the buyer has the right, if for any reason they are not satisfied with the results of the inspection, they can terminate the agreement by written notice within 5 days and get their deposit back. There is no 14B on the CTR contract. The buyer does not have the right to get out of their contract for any reason. Okay, so let me show you that. On the CTR contract, the date of the inspection contingency is the final date for all inspection negotiations. So it has to include the time for actual inspections and buyer and seller discussions. If a buyer chooses to engage the remedy clause, they have to do so before the inspection contingency date in writing with copies of the portion of the inspections provided to the seller. Only the section that pertains to what they are asking for. The ECAR contract, on the other hand, doesn't specify. The ECAR contract up here says the written notice shall itemize the requested remedy and shall include a copy of the inspection test report. It sounds like the entire report based on the ECAR contract. It doesn't say just a section, whereas on the CTR contract, it spells out simply the section pertaining to that which is being requested. If an agreement cannot be made within 3 days after the inspection contingency date, the buyer may terminate may terminate the agreement and receive deposit money back. Now, the way the CTR contract reads is that the buyer has to give notice of the inspection of anything that does not meet the standards set forth with copy of the relevant pages of the report on or before X number of calendar days after the date that this contract is fully executed. So you have to give yourself enough time to have the inspections, get the reports, and negotiate. Otherwise, the contract goes forward as if the buyer is satisfied. If the seller and buyer cannot reach, and this is really important, if they cannot reach a mutually satisfactory written agreement regarding the correction of the matters, then the buyer may terminate. It has to be mutually satisfactory. No later than 3 calendar days after the inspection contingency date. If the buyer terminates this contract pursuant to the rights under this paragraph, they shall receive all deposited sums and the obligations of the parties under the contract shall end. So they do not have the right to get out for any reason. It has to be mutually satisfactory to both parties. Okay, I think I did that in about 15 minutes. There's a lot of other sort of nuances to both contracts, but I felt like these 3 were probably the biggest ones that I see in my office that trip people up. And that really is that second deposit, again, has to come in the form of a certified or bank check, the timing of the inspections, and that mortgage contingency. So, does anybody have any questions with that?
I didn't see any in the chat, but John, do you have any comments you want to add to those differences from an attorney standpoint?
Well, first of all, I've not analyzed the CTR contract other than listening to this right now, so I can't comment any outside of that.
Okay.
I think it's really interesting the inspection stuff, you know, I think that's just a matter of following the right process. I think the deposit, especially the time is of the essence language in the deposit is interesting, especially considering it seems over the past several years, we've had more and more issues of deposit not reaching the listing agent with the contract listing reaching the agent. I think that's very interesting, and that might be something worth looking at. The most interesting thing to me is the mortgage contingency section. And that is because historically, the mortgage contingency has been a right reserved to the buyer. In other words, if they're unable to satisfy the mortgage contingency, they have two choices. They can either terminate based on the mortgage contingency that they have, or they can, in effect, waive the mortgage contingency by continuing with the transaction, notwithstanding the fact that they do not have an unconditional commitment on the commitment date. The CTR contract obviously takes and changes that, throws that on its head by giving the seller the right to terminate. And I will tell you that, you know, I'm not sure that ultimately it'll turn into a situation where it'll be handled any differently, but every lender in the world reserves the right to, as Heather said, re-verify employment, for example. They do it almost always the day before, within 2 days of closing. They almost always now rerun credit the day before closing. So things have changed in the marketplace, and with respect to the CTR contract, it's not consistent with the way the market is in terms of continuing the transaction in a really smooth way. It has a tendency, I would think, the way it's drafted, to put the brakes on the transaction when maybe the brakes aren't appropriate. But I mean, it is what it is. I think it's very interesting. It would certainly, all of those issues would be worthy of conversation for the forms committee, in my opinion. And I think that agents really need it. And so when I talk to agents, when I go to I don't go to their offices much anymore, but when I talk with agents at office meetings and things like that, I tell them that you need to really understand your contract. But even more importantly, if you're going to accept a contract that isn't your contract, you better take the time before you present it to your client to read those contracts that are out there, because there are a lot of them, right? I mean, it's not just CTR contracts. There's the Hartford board contracts. Every board has their own contract. So I think it's very important for you as brokers to make sure that your agents are aware of the fact, not necessarily that CTR has this provision wrong, although that's something they need to understand when they see a CTR contract, but they need to understand that they're looking at contracts that they don't recognize, that they don't see all the time. And they have to take the time to review them and see the differences. And frankly, listen to what Heather said in her 15-minute presentation. It's all very good.
Hey, John, at our office meeting when Heather did this morning, it did come up. So what is your thoughts on the agents that insist in the MLS, they're saying you must submit all offers on X offer?
You know something? I am all for it. I mean, especially, look, it's a seller's market. So it's really easy for a seller to say, hey, look, you want my client to review your offer. It comes in on a contract that I am best suited to explain to my client. Having said that, you know, if you get an offer in on a CTR contract and it's $15,000 higher than the best offer that you've received so far, do you want to just turn it away automatically?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is probably not. But there's nothing wrong with saying you want to see an ECAR contract. You understand it, you know it, you can explain it to your client well. You're not as comfortable with an out of county contract. I mean, I think that's legit. Having said that, you know, there's always a way, really easy way. And I tell this to new agents when I do orientation. There is no reason in the world why you can't add a provision to a contract that says subject to attorney review within 3 business days.
Yeah.
And the advantage that creates for you as agents, you as brokers, and therefore your agents, is that you want to take as much responsibility away from you as you can. And as soon as you get that contract to an attorney and make them responsible for reviewing it, you then have taken a crap load of responsibility off of your agent who's never seen this contract before, taking the responsibility off their shoulders. And I don't know an attorney that does this regularly in our area that would say, no, sorry, I don't do that. You know, I'm not interested in doing that. And if they do, guess what? Call Andrew, because he will.
It's standard practice in New
And
York State.
Just
Kim.
to clarify that CTR contract is the Greater Hartford contract.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
no, I don't mean to
that's my
correct
bad.
you, but yeah, that was Greater Hartford's contract that CTR has adopted. So
And
they've
most
stamped
other
their stamp on
boards
it.
are using that contract, and we have our own, and then some brokerages have their own.
You know, I think that part of it is just getting used to a new set of language, but I think that there's some good things there. I'm not like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the mortgage contingency in effect being exercisable by a seller.
I can tell you that being on this side where I see it more on the Middlesex side, the disadvantage of it is it creates, like you said, it slams on the brakes where now you have agents that are debating the conditions of somebody's mortgage contingents, like somebody's commitment letter, right? Somebody's arguing over whether somebody's going to pay off their credit card debt, or, you know what I mean? Like it stops being about the house and it turns into some other negotiation that I personally think doesn't need to be part of the real estate transaction. It needs to be between the buyer and their lender. And I think should be confidential information, but it's written into the contract that commitment letter is being shared with the seller. So
Can I just say one more thing, and then Greg, I know you have your
Yeah,
hand up.
Greg, be next.
The other thing the only thing I'd like to say is that, you know, realistically, the mortgage contingency, I don't know how many of you have had significant experience with that being the big issue in the deal. I think that most mortgage officers now are fairly good. I don't see a lot of people like, so if we closed 1,500 or 1,800 transactions last year, I'd probably say that maybe 5 that I can remember got terminated as a result of the mortgage contingency, and
because they haven't gotten to you yet.
Huh?
They haven't gotten to you yet because they
Well,
fall
zero.
apart before they
I don't
reach you.
remember. Well, that's possible too, but I don't remember any where the issue of the mortgage contingency became the reason for the dispute that led to a termination. You know what I'm saying? That it's just not that. So I don't know that it's a suitable or an appropriate term to totally throw on its head. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt again.
So go ahead, Greg.
First off, I want to say thank you to Susie and Heather for flushing this topic out, because it's actually something that as practitioners, we are presented with every single day. There are 5 contracts in the state. ECAR,
More.
CTR, which is GHAR, Middlesex, Ravis, Berkshire, okay? They are all subtly different. And I love the highlights and the contrast between the two that Heather put. I want to give kudos to John and Andrew for Article 1C, that buyer grants permission to the lending institution to provide status of his or her loan to the agents involved with the transaction. That one sentence, when I've been a buyer's agent in any other county other than New London or Wyndham, it's awesome because of the fact that then the lender's forced to talk to me. And the ECAR mortgage commitment it's an interesting thing because how many times have we seen, I've seen mortgage commitment with conditions that are 2 pages. It's disgusting. And then we've got to parse it. And so the spotlight that Heather just put on that time frame is really critical and something that I had not really, I had kind of glossed over. So thank you, Heather, for that. The other thing that I want to point out is that the deposit component that Heather started with, and I'm going to share in chat, I have solved the problem with slow deposits coming in. And it depends on what side you're on. If you're on the listing side, the deposit coming in has been an issue. We all know that CTR 24-hour rule, sorry, we have to change status within 24 hours of both parties signing. And it's not conditioned upon deposit being received. Wire transfers we know have risk. Wire transfers we know have cost. So one thing I will share with you guys as brokers to look at is the deposit link. Deposit link allows me to to receive deposits. And I received one from Fairfield County, and I did a full rewrite on a contract that was $900,000+. I just did a rewrite. I said, I'll rewrite it on our board form. Now I've got dexterity in the ECAR contract. And what's interesting is the client used deposit link to transfer $40,000+, which exceeds commissions. And I'm going to be able to push at no cost to the attorney, using the ACH network versus wire transfer. I'm always worried about wire transfers instructions being intercepted by scammers and those account and routing numbers being changed. The ACH network is different. So I just share in chat, and it's not going to be available on replay. So everybody that's here, take a look at deposit link. That's it. But thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Heather. That was really, I love the contrast. Thank you.
So Greg, for the recording, that's depositlink.com/FAQs.
Yeah, that it's just it's an ACH network where I can push, I can receive deposits, and literally I just shared the link with the the buyer's agent. I'm the listing agent in the transaction I just did. I gave her the link to share with her client. I don't have the buyer client's emails. She shared it with them. They did the secure transfer. The deposit, they don't have to pay $20 or $30, $20 for a wire transfer. They don't have to pay $15 for for overnight mail. And then we start the clock ticking on the deposit clearing. The deposit cleared in 12 to 24 hours. And the only thing that's a hiccup is if the deposit is initiated at freaking 5 o'clock on a Friday, no different than our closing custom changes, we could have it not clear until Monday at 6 o'clock. And it's a win-win for all of us buyers or sellers agents and the attorneys. And we can even extend it to issuing commission checks if you want, no charge. The only people that pay are the buyers and the sellers that do the transfers.
And how much does it cost? Just $10?
Nothing. It only costs the buyer who wired, instead of doing a wire for $20, the wire in Fairfield County sent me $40,000 for $10.
Huh.
Done.
That's good. Well,
Yeah.
great. All right. Now, what else we got on the agenda there, Susie?
There was a question that came up from Camille Taylor about the remedy and how it's being used. So Camille, are you on the call? If not, John, I think you are aware of this topic. Maybe you want to speak to that.
I can't remember exactly what happened. And Camille doesn't seem to be here. I think.
Okay.
It has to do with
It becomes a
The
part of the
lend-
contract.
Lender getting all the information that's in a part of the remedy, I think is,
Oh, right.
I believe that's what the issue was.
Okay, so I have like 5 minutes. So this is when I teach contracts, I tell people that the problem is that with repairs, lenders don't want to see the repair addendum. They don't want to see that their house is a piece of crap and what the parties are agreeing to do about that. So what I suggest is that you use, in effect, 2 addendums to accomplish a purpose once you've reached the end of your negotiations regarding home inspections. The first one is the standard addendum where you just add a closing cost credit for any funds that are to be, in effect, paid by the seller to the buyer, right? You just increase the closing cost credit to do that. And then on a different addendum, on the repair addendum, the form repair addendum, you have the repairs that are to be completed. Those addendums have to be executed contemporaneously. In other words, they have to be executed at the same time, because you don't want one without the other. And that's the conversation I had with Camille. I can't remember what happened in our deal. There's way more to discuss about remedies and how they're handled in our contract. But I think that's what is that what you wanted to discuss, Bonnie? Just how to handle that?
I know I've had a deal with her anything that is been negotiated, I think she feels that it has to be shared with the lender. And, a lot of the lenders don't want to know some of these things, so.
No, none of them want to see it,
No.
I mean, I think.
But her opinion, I think, I wish she was here to give her own take on it, is that if it is an addendum to the contract because you've negotiated in the remedy repairs, then she feels that it needs to go to the lender.
Well, we all have our own level of our own moral compass, and we should follow them. So if she wants to give a lender all of that stuff, then she should give a lender all that stuff. It's going to affect her deals, and maybe she'll change her mind, or maybe she won't.
Okay.
But I think realistically, the way we all handle this and is that, Carol, yeah, it does say that it becomes part of the PNS. You're right.
That's the big issue, is that it states on the form that it becomes part of the contract. So how do you not give that to the lender if it's part of the contract?
And hey, talk to your lenders, right? Ask your originator. But I mean, we all know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
We all know what's going to happen. If you're replacing a septic system, they're going to want to see everything relating to it. If you're repairing a drippy faucet, they're not going to concern themselves much. But again, it's going to be an underwriting issue. All that stuff goes into underwriting. And the underwriters look at that and say, okay, is this the house that we had appraised? Or is it less of a house because of the issues that are raised in the home inspection? They would always tell you that they don't want to see the home inspection, and I'm telling you that they don't want to see the other stuff. But you guys got to do what you feel is morally appropriate.
Yeah, well, I think it is appropriate to have the forms committee take a look. at that.
Perhaps we'll have this be a larger topic at our next broker forum. So that is to be continued. Thank you, John, for that. Finally,
Okay, I gotta run. You guys have a great day.
Thank you,
You
John.
too. Thank you for everything.
Hang on one second. I want to throw out that, John, I don't know if you realize that you were channeling Toby Griffiths earlier when you.
Oh, it's weird. I was thinking about him just the other
When
day.
you suggested that all of us on this call go and defer to attorney review of the contract and utilize that addendum. Not a bad idea, because it takes it off of us as agents and brokers, and to put it on to the attorney to review the foreign contract. Not a bad idea.
Well, listen, I tell this to all new agents. you guys are in a unique circumstance. You run the deal. I want your business. Andrew wants your business. Every other attorney wants your business. The home inspector wants your business. The lender wants your business. Everybody wants your business. And you should take advantage of that. I mean, you should never take responsibility for something that you don't have to take responsibility for if there's another party in the transaction that you can dump it on. And I'm not saying that because you guys aren't knowledgeable enough to make those decisions or you're not capable. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's all about liability. I mean, it's all about why should you be responsible for something that someone else is more appropriately taking responsibility for? And that's, you know, the legal side. I should be on the hook for everything legal. So anyways, I gotta go. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you, John. We're very
Thank you.
fortunate that Cindy Butts has been able to join us.
Hi, John.
Welcome, Cindy. And if you could give us any updates, especially as I know we're concerned about the updates to the health and procedures that CTR
Sure.
is going to take.
Yeah, so hopefully you all are reading our newsletters. We try to make it, oh, hi, Carol. I see my president on here. Hopefully you all read our newsletters and see our updates. Most of the time we only ask for a 5-minute commitment a week. But we started getting a lot of calls from people who are concerned that you're showing up to do showings or appointments, and lo and behold, it is jam-packed with people everywhere you look. And your clients are saying to you, they're concerned about going into the house or their own safety. So we do know at Connecticut Realtors that CDC has obviously relaxed their mask guidance, the state is going to, but there's still a really large percentage of the population that is not yet vaccinated, possibly including some of your customers and clients, some of our members. If they have depressed immune systems or if they're going through chemotherapy treatments or other surgeries, they may not be eligible to get vaccines. And so what we published yesterday at the top of our open house guidance is saying we fully recognize all of this, but there's still a risk. And Connecticut Realtors is still requesting that you not do broker open houses or public open houses, and instead consider, scheduling appointments, not stacked on top of each other as dramatically as some that we've seen, but just for the sake of all the families. And I'd be happy, and Carol can as well, I'd be happy to answer any questions about that, and then I'll do our second update if you have any. We know people have been doing these throughout the pandemic. There's no question, and our guidance is completely voluntary. Whoops, I'm doing an echo, I think. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't see anybody's hand raised.
Okay. The next issue is something known as Section 4-6641. Hopefully you've all signed up for our text program, so you're aware that we're trying to convince the House of Representatives that we absolutely cannot have municipal taxes. So what the proposal is right now would permit any municipality effective July 1st, 2021, so that's like less than 2 months from now, I think, they could adopt it. So if you have closing schedule in July, or any purchase after July, if that municipality decides to adopt this new tax, your buyer or seller or both are going to have this. And it could mean, obviously, and you sell real estate, I don't, but you know that introducing a new negotiation detail that late in the process could either stop the transaction altogether or, or make them find money that they may not have. Because it doesn't say who pays it. It says the buyer or the seller or negotiated. So that's going to put a lot of the responsibility on your transaction to figure out what that is. So far, 5,300 members have done the call to action to send letters to their house member. But we are about to launch sometime this week something for you to give to your clients and customers. So if you have a seller or a buyer currently in a transaction who you think may be willing to reach out and say, I just can't afford to pay this, or I don't want to pay it, or I think it's terrible, or whatever they may want to say, we have a pre-printed call to action, one on the buyer side and one on the seller side, that they can use to communicate their concern as the people who might need to pay this. One of the arguments we get is, well, it's completely optional. Why would a municipality do it? And it's because our experience is when a municipality has the option, they absolutely take the option. And it's so broad for what it can be used for, including things like maintaining open space or anything related to climate, that, municipalities may just adjust their budget to free up money for other things by instead using money that they may otherwise use to preserve open space. But we oppose time of transfer taxes all the time. It does not even matter how noble the good is. We don't see why someone at the time of the transaction should be paying for something that an entire municipality benefits from. So that's our second major update. You'll see more about it from Susie, and you'll see more about it from us. But for those of you willing to reach out to your buyers and sellers just to give them a heads up about it, it would really help us for legislators to hear from them. So thank you for giving me a few
Wonderful.
minutes.
Thank you. Carol, you're here, you're our state president. Is there anything you wanted to add or touch on top of what Cindy said?
I think Cindy said what I would have said if Cindy wasn't here. So I don't really have much else to say, except we'll make sure that when things, as we hear things, that we get the word out so you guys know what's going on. But it is really to get involved with the text messaging as well as the ECAR text messaging as well, because Susie's very good about getting us the information.
And that was ctrealtors.com/text, right?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, and we should also, Carol's been reaching out directly. Mike France is very influential on the Appropriations Committee. So fortunately, some of the leaders in our efforts on this and other issues, Carol, what issue was it you had to reach out to Mike on? Was it?
Well, that was
another bill.
Professionalism.
Yeah, it was on another bill, but a lot of your legislators are, including Joe Courtney, obviously as a member of Congress, are very pro-realtor. So I think just to thank you to all of you who regularly reach out and engage your ECAR reps and senators. They're incredibly helpful to us, and they do. And Marilyn got a call at like 10:30 at night about supporting something, which she was able to give to Jim Heckman. Carol reached out to Carol Austin and Mike France and others. So I think when you see your legislators, be sure to thank them for everything they're doing, because they really do help us. Correct, Marilyn and Carol, I don't think we currently have problems with anyone, do we?
No, but I said, I think it's really important what you just said about a lot of times the legislators don't understand why we're for or against something. And when they hear from us directly, it really makes a big difference. As we found out yesterday when we reached out to some people who had voted against something we were looking for, and after we explained it, they actually changed their vote. So
friend them on Facebook, thank them if you see them.
Well, I think, Bonnie, I think we're doing well on time, but I think we need to wrap up. And if anyone has any pressing issues on professionalism that we simply must hear, then please speak up now. Otherwise, Bonnie, perhaps you could close us out for today.
I had heard some complaints from some of the agents about things because of the pressure on so many showings for each contract. And so if you have issues, we do have a code of conduct. Don't neglect that. If there's something that you feel has been done that was inappropriate, raise the issue, because that, and without us bringing it to light, it's not going to change. So,
and we still are dealing with the issue of not properly identifying your brokerage on your social media. I have a complaint sitting in my desk there, so that is an ongoing issue. So brokers, please school your agents that they need to have the brokerage name and the states in which they do business if they're going to be on social media. Cindy, one last thing, is there any update on the Teams thing? Is that at the legislature and not a topic we can talk about yet?
We do not have an update.
Okay.
So hopefully all of you read that the Department of Consumer Protection said there's nothing in our statute that permits teams to exist right now. So we're working with DCP to ensure that there is some and they said it has to be incredibly transparent to give guidance to our company so that teams are able to operate legally here in Connecticut. So we are working with DCP on that.
Okay,
But we will keep you updated on that in 5 and 5 as well.
okay, great.
Perfect. Well, really, really appreciate so many of you coming out today for the broker forum. It's awesome to see so many people involved, and thank you so much. Our attorneys are gone, but thank you, Heather. Thank you, Cindy, our guests, and thank you, Susie, for setting this up. And unless anybody has anything last minute? Oh, yes, Lorna. Was that a? Oh, no. Okay. If anybody has, we will see you again at our next event. Hopefully you're coming to many of them.
I'll just throw out that I can't wait for the replay, because share it with all agents in the office. This contract language, if you're practicing real estate, you got to know it. So this replay of this event is going to be great. So Susie, I hope it recorded.
And take the suggestion that John offered of adding, add the attorney review. There's no harm in adding that.
Yeah, and let me just add a part that we've learned from doing video. You should definitely crop out the parts that you want people to see, because when they see 1 hour, they're not going to watch any of it. So if you take out only the 5 or 10 minutes that carry the information that someone may need, that's a lot easier to get
That's a good point.
understood.
Yeah.
Because even saying go to minute 10, I mean,
Yeah.
we've tried as you all know, I don't know if you're watching our stuff, but we really see much greater success if we only give you the one part you need to know instead of it, all the whole hour, for example.
Great suggestion.
Awesome suggestion, Cindy. Good to see you today.
Yes, good to see everyone. Have a great
Thank
day.
you so much. Have a great day.
Everyone. Bye, Cindy. Thank you.